Allah Azza wa Jal in Surah Al-Kahf, a surah that we're supposed to recite every Friday, mentions 4 stories. And the third of these stories involves Musa alayhi salam, and it's the only time that the story has been mentioned. It's a very different part of his life, and it's a very personal journey. Most of the time when you read about Musa alayhi salam, it's either him directly speaking with Allah, or he's engaged with the Israelites, or he's challenging the Pharaoh, and it's a very public role or a leadership role. But in this particular story, it's very different from all the other things we learn about Musa alayhi salam. As a matter of fact, there are so many mysteries about this story, we don't even know exactly where to place this in his life. We know that it seems to have happened after they crossed the water, but exactly when historically and where he went, we don't know. And Allah chose not to tell us. But some things I want you to know about today for the purpose of this khutbah. My intention is not to actually tell you the entire story, but to highlight something Allah said within this profound account that Allah has mentioned. And that is that Allah Azza wa Jalla, in describing Musa alayhi salam, first of all, the most talked about prophet in the entire Quran. Nobody's mentioned by name more than Musa alayhi salam. And of course, he's been given the book, which then became the book that's more prophets taught than any other prophet. Meaning Allah gave him Tawrat, and after he gave him Tawrat alayhi salam, every generation after him had a prophet, and they taught Tawrat again and again and again and again and again. So more prophets were students of what he was given than any other prophet. So also, of course, Allah Azza wa Jalla describes the people that ascribe themselves to him, the Jewish community. He describes them as ahbar, people of ink, people of knowledge, right? And ulama Bani Israel, Quran uses the word scholars, or people of knowledge of the Israelites, meaning these are people that actually have profound knowledge. This is something they have from Allah, that Allah Azza wa Jalla gave them. Even after the changes they made to the book, there's still some knowledge that they possess. So Allah highlights the knowledge and the highest status of Musa alayhi salam over and over again in the Quran. But then in this story, he is not the teacher, he's the student. Musa alayhi salam, who is in every other scenario a teacher, is now a student. And this is not early on. You know, when you think of education, early on in your career, you're learning, you're a student, and when you get certain qualifications, then after that you become a teacher. That's the normal progression of things. But this, from what we can tell, is actually happening much later on in the life of Musa alayhi salam, much after he's been a teacher. As a matter of fact, he's been a teacher to the Israelites. He's already received the Torah. He has been teaching on behalf of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And if we're to accept the authenticity of the narration, it's even claimed that nobody was more knowledgeable on earth than Musa alayhi salam, that he didn't know of anyone who had more knowledge. And yet Allah tells him, there's someone who knows more than you do, and you need to go learn from him. And so this really interesting story is now about someone who from what we can tell in the Quran, was given more knowledge than anybody else, and yet Allah is telling him that you need to go learn from someone else. Now, the more someone is learned, the more qualifications they have, credentials they have, the higher status they have in society. I'm not even talking about religious knowledge. If somebody's got a PhD, it's a form of respect. If somebody's a professor in university, it's a kind of prestige. We know that. This is why we celebrate people that graduate, whether you're graduating high school or college, or you got a master's degree, or you got a PhD, or with Islamic studies you got an ijazah, or you finished memorizing the Quran. Whenever somebody accomplishes something in education, their status is increased. They're more recognized in the society. People listen to them and they have more validity. And yet this person who Allah describes as more knowledgeable, clearly as even than Musa alayhi salam, rather Musa alayhi salam is traveling an exhaustive amount to come learn from him. Nobody knows him. Nobody knows him. As a matter of fact, one of the most interesting things is that we don't even know his name. The Quran, Allah did not mention his name. Yes, in the narrations we learned the name Khidr or Khadir, and there are variations of that spelling that are mentioned. But Allah, in his perfect speech, decided not to tell us who is this teacher of Musa alayhi salam. He didn't tell him his name. So how did Allah describe him? This is where I want to begin really today. He says, فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. Meaning Musa alayhi salam and his young assistant, they traveled together and they eventually found, listen to this carefully now, a slave from among our slaves. Which is probably in closer English expression would be just one of our slaves. They just found one of our slaves. One of our slaves is a description of all of us. That's not a special description. We're learning something profound here. To Allah Azza wa Jal, the more someone gains knowledge, the more they are identified as just another one of Allah's slaves. That doesn't make them more special than anyone else, It actually makes them realize, innani min al-muslimin, I'm just among everybody else. I'm not superior to anybody else. You see, every other knowledge, when somebody gains it, somebody gets a degree, they kind of like get a little full of themselves. Like if they're going to a convention and they've got a PhD, they're not just going to say Abdul Karim. They're going to say Dr. Abdul Karim, comma, PhD. Wait, let me put the P with double marker and H and D, you know. Or you introduce yourself to someone, hey, my name is Salman. No, my name is Dr. Salman. Or your email ID, whatever. It doesn't say Zainab, it says Zainab MBA or whatever. You know, you have to add your credential because it's a form of I'm something. I have some value, you know. And people love throwing that on. I'm reminded back in the day when I was in college, this is in the 1800s, but when I used to go to, MSA convention,